everyone, welcome to a new edition of the Atari 1200 XL show. I'm your good buddy, Atari Aaron, just for this show anyway, joined by a man who loves the Atari, your good buddy, the Brent.
I liked E.T.
There you go. Who didn't? You know, I cried like a baby during that movie.
No, the Atari
I know,
version.
you're one of the few. But I like it. Hey, I don't hate like everybody else. I love Howard Scott Warshaw, so there's part of it there. So welcome. We're back again, Brent, for another edition of the old 1200 XL. I think we've got an interesting and thought-provoking topic and game for today's show involving pinball, Brent. But before we get to that, I want to touch base with you on pinball as a genre of games before it came to computers and consoles, when it was just in the arcades. Do you recall when you were first introduced to the pinball machine? And do you have what are your earliest memories of playing physical pinball?
I did not play physical pinball until the 90s.
Really?
I do not recall playing any 80s era pinball.
That surprises me.
I don't know if mom and dad wouldn't let me. I don't know if it was just not available in the places I went, but I don't remember any 80 eras pinball from the 80s. But of course, I always frequented arcades, and Adam's Family is really the first pinball machine I remember getting deep into and playing over and over and over and over.
I believe that one came out in 92, didn't it, Brent?
Somewhere in there, yeah. But from the 80s, I don't know. I guess I was always attached to the video side of the arcade.
You know, it's funny because pinball machines really did become sort of scarce in the mid to late 80s, when the arcades were more inundated with the bigger money makers, easier to maintain our video arcade machine. But as a kid, when arcade machines were much rarer, I saw a ton of pinball machines, and also a lot of just the electromechanical machines, your baseballs, your little flight simulator things where you move the helicopters and stuff around, a lot of that stuff, a lot of the shooting gallery stuff. That stuff was a lot more prevalent back in those days. But pinball was always around. You know, it's something I always remember seeing, if not playing. You know, it's funny, the first machines I really remember playing a lot would have been your early 80s machines. Because, I mean, frankly, it's not like West Virginia had a plethora of arcades in the 70s. Those things really popped up in the 80s. And so it's not like I could get out to, I mean, really, most of the pinball machines were in pool halls. It's not like in the 80s where you could go to the grocery store and you could see them. But there were a few places that had pinball machines in the early 80s, and one I've mentioned this before, but one I remember playing quite a bit was Gorgar, which was a great pinball machine. I believe that's a Williams, and it had great speech. Gorgar, you know that he would talk. I always thought it was a real colorful, beautiful. It had a real hot chick on the cover, a big Conan-looking guy, big demon. Great machine, still one of my faves. But it's funny, even that machine had sort of made the jump to digital because it had the ability to flip chimes on and off back when they weren't sure if a pinball machine would be accepted if they took the chimes out and if they put in like a processing unit to do the audio, which is kind of funny to think about. So even myself, I mean, I know I played pinball before that, but I don't have any grand recollections of like particular tables and whatnot from back then. Now, let me ask you this. All that said, when was the first time you played video pinball, Brent?
You know, again, where I was not a big pinball player to begin with, and video pinball had no appeal to me. Zero appeal. I mean, to be completely honest, even now, video pinball is just outside of some virtual reality aspects of video pinball where you can actually lean over the table and line up shots. And even then, pinball to me needs to be physical. You need to be able to smack the side of the machine. You need to be able to really get down low and look. And you just can't do that in video pinball. So I've never been a big fan of video pinball.
It's funny, but of course, I knew people in the family that had Atari 2600s back in the day. And I remember the first time I played video pinball was on an Atari 2600, the video pinball for the 2600, which is horrible. I mean, really it's vaguely reminiscent of a pinball machine, but that's the best you could say about it. But that was the first time I saw it. And then there was steady improvement from there. It seems like almost every machine, every console had their own pinball program. I mean, the Fairchild Channel F had one. The Intellivision had one. Everyone had one. But I think it took a while for people to understand how to and also the power had to be there. But it took a while for people to understand what a pinball on a computer or a console should be like, as opposed to just having something where you hit the ball up in the air and hope something happens. I remember the NES had a good quality port of a pinball machine. It was based on an actual pinball machine. I think it was Pinbot, and this was. Now, granted, was this great shakes? But I mean, compared to a lot of other stuff, this was like unbelievable.
And when you talk about when you get into your pinball fantasies, and
pinball dreams
even
on the Amiga,
those type of games, then I'm starting to get on board.
Yeah, those were mind blowing. Those games, I mean, 21st Century, those guys, that was all the top shelf pinball. Amiga had that cornered, and then eventually Epix sort of caught up with their Epix pinball series, and of course now pinball has really come a long way since then, with all the virtual tables that you can play, like you said, with virtual reality tables, plus the virtual tables you can play, like like where they put a TV in an actual pinball case. They've done a good job. Well, of course, a lot of that it comes down to emulating the DMDs and just technology advanced. There's a lot of stuff that's different. Now, one more thing I want to touch on before you got to the main topic. Have you ever played one of the arcade pinball machines that's comprised entirely of a monitor? Have you ever seen one of these?
No, I have not.
I actually played one of these. I believe this was an early 80s machine where they were trying to sort of capture the video game ease of use, I think, in a pinball game. And this game sucked. I mean, it was horrible. They couldn't give it away. But it was a full-size pinball machine with a monitor in it. It was no good. But they tried. The
thing with pinball, especially 80s virtual pinball, is people don't realize how hard gravity is to calculate.
Yeah.
And if you don't have good physics in a pinball machine, you have pachinko.
Yeah.
And no one wants to play pachinko pinball.
That's true. So let's go ahead and get into it, Brentster. The game we chose to look at this week, and I'm guessing you never heard of this one, Brent.
Nope.
But so I sort of introduced it to him. But this one is called Dave's Midnight Magic, Brent. Now, Dave's Midnight Magic was a game that really came out of nowhere back in the day. I remember when this came out. This rolled out in 1982. An Apple and the Atari 8-bit version came out the same year. This started on the Apple, which so many games start on the Apple too, and this is another one. The programmer of this game, David Schneider, he on the Atari he had done a game called Serpentine. This game actually got multiple releases on the Atari. We'll get to that in a little while. This also came out in '83 on the C64. This game had multiplayer. You could play with multiple players on it, a hot seat, and this pinball machine is probably, in my reckoning, the first ever video pinball machine that didn't totally suck. And there are reasons for that. Because when Dave Schneider released it, and it was published by Broderbund, I found an interview with Dave, and Dave basically said he knew he wanted to do a pinball machine, but he didn't want to go out and just lay a dud because he wasn't good at making pinball machines. Obviously, it's not easy to do, as we've seen. If you ever play a real pinball machine, you know what a good one is and what a good one's not. And so what he did was base his machine on an existing property that was popular at the time, and that existing property was from Williams, and it was called Black Knight. Now, have you played this pinball machine? I'm sure you have. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Black Knight is a classic.
What do you think of this one?
I think it is overrated just because people rate it so high, but I there's no denying it's a great pinball machine.
All right. Yeah, it's a good one. It's got all the great sound effects. Williams, listen, Williams were the master of pinball. I don't think anyone's going to say that. I mean, when you ask people what was the number one all-time pinball company, they're going to say Williams if they know what they're talking about. And so when Williams puts out a good machine. This was popular, and so David was like, "Well, let's see what we can do." And so, if you look here, David's Midnight Magic, the layout of the field. If you're watching this video at home, on the right we've got the Black Knight table, and you can see it's very similar. Similar outlines. The one thing that sets Black Knight apart was the upper playfield that you had to access through a couple ramps. And then you've got drop targets in various corners. They're all matched up perfectly on Midnight Magic. I mean, I'll give him credit. He did a good job adapting the Black Knight to a television screen, didn't he?
Here's the thing: he didn't take inspiration from Black Knight. He straight up ripped off the table.
Well, he admits it though. I mean, he admits it, and I mean, really, I don't think there was ever. I didn't read or find anything in my studies where there was any sort of legal action.
So, well, no, I wouldn't think there would be, but there's no question that this is a 100% video representation of Black Knight.
The funny thing is that just struck me as funny, especially coming from Atari. You know, he picks a Black Knight table, and then of course this gets ported to Atari, and eventually Atari publishes later on for the XEGS. But Atari made pinball machines. They had plenty of pinball machines. Ask pinball aficionados what they think of Atari machines. They're probably not going to like them that much, frankly, because I can't think of any standout Atari. Can you?
I can't either.
They did. I think they did that. I think they did. Did they do Hercules? Wasn't that one of theirs?
That's not a standout pinball.
Well,
machine.
I didn't say it was, but it is known for being huge. You know, they did some huge pinball machines. But they didn't necessarily do good ones. But if you're going to steal from the best. And I agree with you, by the way. This isn't my favorite machine. Actually, I think I like Black Knight 2000 better than this. But I mean, this one's.
I wouldn't go that far.
This one's still fun. The objectives are clear, and they're the same on Days of Midnight Magic as they were on the regular pinball machine. You want to shoot your balls into the area where they become trapped. And captured, and then you eventually want to trigger the multi-ball by pushing your ball through a little end ramp that sets on the bottom playfield, and that releases whatever balls you've got stored up in the ball capture. So yes, this does have multi-ball. Yes, this machine kept track of bonuses. They kept track of things that, in Black Knight, you've got things that can protect your outlanes. This had those as well. It also had signals that would come up on the board that would show you, that would point to stuff, that would light up and say, do this, do that. It had representations of drop targets. It had things that you need to play a proper pinball game with a rule set, because I think one of the things that has happened to pinball from back in those days is that they were a lot like pachinko with flippers, weren't they? You just sort of hit the falling ball, and it makes stuff spin and go ding. And that was because the people that made these tables didn't know anything about pinball, did they?
Yeah, pinball is an art. I mean, to line up, and the thing is, it's an art and a science, because there's a lot of math that goes into creating a good pinball table. I mean, you have to have good graphics, you have to have good sound, you have to have, an exciting property of some sort. But at the end of the day, to have a good pinball machine, you have to have a good layout, and a good layout means math.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand that. They think that they can just throw some stuff on a play field, put a bell on it and call it a day.
Yeah.
But you're the people who make your standout pinball machines and aren't just one-off flukes that can do it consistently. It's an art, and they know the math behind the shots.
Yeah, that's true. And they know what works. Well, a lot of it's just from experience, too. It's funny, when I found an interview with David, who put this together, and he mentions that, when he finally got this sold, and Broderbund was going to put it out there, Broderbund had 12 employees at the time when he got this sold. And he knew he had a hit on his hands when he said the first week someone came in and they ordered 2,000 copies which that's a ton of
Wow.
copies. This is 82, mind you.
Yeah, that's
when
insane.
you're Apple. And so this guy literally blew up, and he was surprised as anybody. He was like, "Hey!" And I'll tell you something. This game was. I remember this distinctly. And you got to remember, in '82, I was only 11 years old. But I remember this game. It was everywhere. And keep in mind, there was no internet. This like crap. It was all magazines, and you saw ads for this all the time, and people had it. You saw it on the store shelves. I mean, this was a very popular game. And I would certainly tell you it was the first pinball game that really blew up. And he knocked this sucker out in about 6 to 8 months. So not too bad. And he was smart enough and wise enough to steal a good, well thought out machine. And that made a big difference. And of course, that got him ported to a bunch of stuff over and over. Now, I want to talk about, since this is the Atari 1200 XL show, I want to talk about the sort of second printing of this game. The first printing of this, the first run that came to the 8-bits in 82, one of the funny features on it is it had a pop bumper up in the middle of the playfield with an apple on it, which is funny. And in fact, when I first loaded this up, I hadn't played this thing forever. And I saw that, and I was like, wait a minute, did I load the Apple II version of this? No, you didn't. You loaded the right one. So another thing that this had when it was released in 82 was that you played this with paddles. You didn't play it with the joysticks. So you had to have paddles to play it, and because it had a tilt feature effectively that you could use if you whacked the space bar. I don't know if did you get that? Did you try tilting the thing?
I never got that part of it to work.
The re-release, or the second release in 87 for the XEGS, which by the way, this is, when I say it was released for the XEGS, it came with the XEGS packaging, the XEGS labels, the whole 9 yards. It was also made so you could play it with joysticks. But in that release, they changed the pop bumper from an Atari, or from an Apple symbol to an Atari logo. So they at least corrected that.
Good call.
Yeah, no kidding. I was stunned that got put out, with that on there. Of course, the XEGS was doomed. Now, I want you to ponder something for a minute. This game got re-released for the XEGS in 87, Brent.
That's insane.
What do you think about that? I mean, what was the landscape like in 87 to release something like this? I mean, it boggles the mind. And you can see how these would not sell very many copies to think that. I mean, it's so archaic. This was 5 years old at that time when it came out. It's amazing to me. And if you look now, granted, most of your real hardcore pinball games, your Pinball Dreams, whatnot, they were still 5 years away. So it wasn't a complete joke, but it was still absolutely ludicrous. And I can't imagine they sold too many of those in 87, but by God, they did get released. I should mention that if you're looking for this, the version that was released in 87, the serial on it's RX 8083, and it's not that rare, so which that's no surprise. I found that most of the XL games aren't the XEG games aren't that rare. You can find a lot of them in box. I came across a couple and I wasn't even looking. So but I've got an XEGS, so it's kind of fun to occasionally look for them. So, Britt,
now,
what did you think of
when I played this?
Yeah, that's where I was going.
I was like I said, I'm not a big fan of this type of video pinball, because it always feels clunky. And when I looked at the table and the table looks barren, as in there's not graphics on the table, I was like, here we go. Yep. It's like I'm gonna struggle through this crap. Yep. And what made it worse was I couldn't figure out the buttons right away, yeah. So I had to hunt and peck and figure out what did what and how to actually shoot the plunger the ball and whatnot. So going into it, I was already frustrated. And when I plunged my first ball, it goes around the loop at the top and straight down the drain. And I was like, okay. So I plunged the next ball, exact same thing happens. If you don't hit anything, the ball shoots, goes around the top part of the play field, and drains every single time. So I was like, man, I actually stepped away from it. I was like, I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to come back and give this another shot. Once I started playing it, I was amazed at how efficient and well thought out the physics in this game is. Is it perfect? Of course not. Nothing from this year is going to be perfect. However, when the ball would roll, it would pick up momentum, and you could do some things in this that you do in actual pinball, like lane transfer passes, where you actually just roll it off the top of your flipper onto the other side. You couldn't do where you bounce it off the rubbers at the bottom, but you could post transfer. That's what I was trying to think of. But you could do different types of flipper transfers to get it to the flipper you wanted. And that got me very excited. So I played this game for a very long time. And I was desperate to get a three-ball multi-ball, and I never pulled it off. It is possible. It is in the game. I know it is.
Yep.
But I was never personally able to get more than two. Because the shot to lock the boss is incredibly difficult.
You have to get a good bounce off that pop bumper, or just a really fortunate flip off that right upper bumper.
Well, you can flip it in. It's just very difficult. Yeah. The ball has to be going the right speed and everything else.
Most of the time for me, I would whack it with the upper left flipper. It would bounce into the pop bumper and shoot through into that lane. That's what most of the time. Every once in a while, I could hit it in with the flipper, but it was a real tough shot.
But the nice thing about this game, over even video pinball that is produced today, is the shots aren't canned. It's not like if you shoot it close to the hole, that magical gravity forces are going to pull it through the hole. No, you don't get any of that. There is no, well, we know what you were going for, the game helps you out. You have to get it there. I mean, you might get a lucky bounce, I'm not saying that. But so often in video pinball, in old video pinball and new video pinball, you would shoot something close trying to go up a ramp, or close trying to get into a hole, and the game would just give it to you. And it would just pull it in there. This game does not do that, which makes it incredibly difficult, but doubly incredibly satisfying when you pull off something you're trying to do. I racked up some pretty good scores on this. I think my best was like 180,000, and it felt good. I really enjoyed my time with this game. And this is something that if I had an icon on my desktop, you know how like Space Cadet, the built-in Windows pinball, I would play that every now and again just because it was something to do. If I had an icon on my desktop that I could double-click and get this to come up, and you can sort of with web pages and stuff, where you can play one quick game and then get out of it, I would do that. And I'm going to do that because I really enjoyed my time with this on a genre of game that I have no interest in. I found this to be incredibly appealing.
I'm surprised to hear that. I'm pleasantly surprised. You know, my take on it is this. If you ever wondered what it would be like to have a pinball table on top of one of those electric football tables, this is the answer right here. Because you know the ones that shake the little guys across the field?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This ball is electric. I mean, this thing's juiced.
It wants to move.
The gills.
There's no question about it.
When you do a ball, when you hold the ball in your flipper, it shoots around like it's ready to explode. It's a Mexican jumping bean of balls, and it's lively. The gravity in this it plays fast. And you're right. First of all, the gap between the two flippers is too wide, or they could at least. I would love to have a peg there or something, because this thing's a drain machine, and you know I'm right here. It drains down that center.
It's hard. Yeah, it's very hard.
It's not so bad on the out lanes because they're hard to get to, but that center lane, that's brutal. So it's a drainer. On top of that, shot making is not easy, and part of the reason is because that ball's jumping around. It makes it hard to take a precise, skilled shot. With all that, and of course, yes, the playfield's blank. But there was a method to the madness in the playfield, which is that's where that with the blank playfield that leaves them open to put in indicators, arrows, instructions on there, and it works because we're got to play the hand you're dealt on these things. In terms of what he took from Black Knight, does it have the lower loop? Yes. Does it have the upper flippers in the correct spots? Yes. Does it have the capture multi-ball? Yes. Multi-ball. This could be the first home video game that ever had 3-ball multi-ball or 4-ball multi-ball. It's got all the things you would expect. It's got the drop targets in the right spot. I mean, he had to make this thing fit, and he did a pretty good job, really. Yeah. So as a translation of the Black Knight game, I mean, this is pretty darn good, but there are plenty of things I don't like. I can't imagine what he was thinking when he had you use the paddles and in one version. That's a bizarre. Not every computer owner had those paddles,
that didn't make any sense either.
Yeah, that's bizarre to me. I should mention that on the later Atari XEGS release, they got rid of the Daves, so it's David's. It's just Midnight Magic. So he lost his name on the second one. I like the idea that the guy that made it put his name in. I like the fact that he's sorta. I mean, the table is not flashy or anything, but I mean, if you consider the time it was released and what came before it, it's the flashiest table of all time. It's got cursive writing. It's got 4-player support. It's got a lot of stuff going for it.
It has a bonus count up.
Yeah.
As you roll over things, you get bonus, and it displays it as this big number off to the side, and it is incredibly satisfying to watch that score tick up when you lose your ball, and you're getting those big bonuses, and you're getting the ×2 and ×3 and 4 and 5, and it just counts it and then resets and counts it and resets.
And that's satisfying. The way you feel when you play actual pinball, and so that's a good thing. I like the fact that I love the fact that he put in all the indicators, because who would have thunk that would happen? And plenty of,
and it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he put in the same ones that are in the pinball machine in the arcade. The Black Knight, because they tell you where you need to go. Okay, this right here will, if the arrow is pointing towards your out lane, you could turn on your basically in the arcade it's a magna save. If the arrow is pointing up the tunnel lane, that means you can release a ball. It lets you know what you're supposed to be doing. And the rest of it's pretty self-explanatory. Get the ball caught. I mean, once you play this once, you'll know what you're doing. I didn't find it as difficult to get the ball in the upper playfield in this as it is on Black Knight. I thought Black Knight it's always been a pain in the butt to get that ball up in the upper playfield. This isn't too bad. Of course, I didn't hit the loop as much as I do in Black Knight, but there you go. But the ball is pretty juiced in this. And Brent nailed it. The most dangerous part of this game is when you're launching. You really sort of have to take something off the ball when you launch it, because it's very unsatisfying when you drain 2 or 3 times. It's like, oh God. Well,
I mean, it's easy to stop once you know it's going to happen, but it's very frustrating the first few times you do it. Another thing, you were talking about the jittery ball when you have it captured in your flipper. That's very true. And I'm guessing that is because they have that roll physics that they have. But this shot, the game wants you to shoot these shots on the fly. Yeah. They don't want you to hold. They don't want you to capture up. So I mean, that isn't very pinball-like, but video pinball, I get it.
I will say I printed out the manual to see if they included a lot of stuff in here, and they did. I'm not gonna go over the scoring, but they've got all the scoring for hitting all the drop targets, what you get for hitting the bumper, all the different stuff you can do. It doesn't have everything that the machine does, but they've got a good chunk of stuff to tell you what different score point-wise. Because if you're going to play this for points, it does sort of help to know what all the point totals you're going to need are.
Oh, sure.
So I like that was kind of neat. I mentioned to you that this game did get a pretty hearty release, and this is how good a release it got at one of my favorite award show, the ARGs. This won Computer Game of the Year at the 4th ARG Awards. That shows you the level of respect that this game demanded.
This is a must play. I'm not saying you have to run out and buy it, but this is something that you need to pull down an emulator for and give it a peek. I think it is definitely a high mark of video pinball of this
When
era.
Atari released Dave's Midnight Magic on the 2600, it did just call it Midnight Magic. That shtick. It's a totally different table. And
Oh yeah,
it's
don't
got
play
a
that.
it's got a big target right in the middle of the table. It actually looks pretty good, but it's not. It doesn't look anything like. It's not like a real table. It looks more like a throwback table,
Yeah.
But still, kind of neat that this game got pedaled around plenty of times, when push comes to shove. In terms of eBay, I should say I looked this up on Atari Mania. They're giving it 6.5 out of 10. A lot of people,
I think that's too
a lot
low.
of people don't like this game now. They said it didn't age well, which if you put this up against one of the modern pinball, virtual pinball types, yeah, it doesn't look as good, duh. But I mean, again, you've got, and am I gonna say it's my favorite? No, like I wasn't as sold on the ball physics as you are, but
I thought the ball physics were
think the ball is a
fantastic.
little bit too juiced. But I mean, I will say one of my problems with the Pinball Dreams and stuff is the ball is real limp, real flat. I wish that there needs to be a happy medium in there. But this game is not as popular now. Like I don't think people get it. And it's one of those things we've talked about so many times, Brent. It's like if you weren't around when it came out, you don't understand what it was, and why it was popular. Just like it reminds me of those After Dark screensavers that were super popular. Like no one now, everybody's like, what the hell is that? But I mean, at the time, you needed a screensaver. They were cool,
Yeah.
Anyway, if you want to pick this thing up on eBay, I saw the XEGS version going for about it's funny. I saw that the complete in box and the loose carts going for about the same price, around $16. So not bad. Not a bad price if you want to pick this one up. You could do worse, I think, Brent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would put $16 into this, just because. I mean, you're buying it for the history of it. You're not buying it for the gameplay experience at this point in time. However, I definitely think it's something worth playing. And if I saw it at a yard sale and I had a computer up that could run it for maybe $7 or $8, maybe even $10 with a box, I would pick it up.
Listen, do David Schneider a favor. Pick up David's Midnight Magic. The royalties have probably dropped down over the past couple years. Help his sucker out, man. He really good on the guy. Like I said, he saw a winning table and he took it and he went to work with it. That's what I like about it. So I like this. It's definitely worth a play. A lot of these games, if you don't even have an emulator, you can go and roll over to archive.org and you can play a whole slew of these classic games, and this is one of them. So I would recommend
Absolutely.
that. Well, hey, we'd like to thank you guys for checking us out this week on the 1200XL show. We'll be back at some point in the not too distant future to play another 8-bit Atari classic. And until then, for the Brent, I am Amigo Aaron, and we will catch you on the flip side. Go out and play some pinball, yo. Adios.